Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Emerging Brands Podcast with Kelly Bennett. Today, I am here with a founder who's literally recording this episode with me from her manufacturer, I believe. And when she signed on, I said, yes, this is why I have this podcast. I love capturing in real time moments of founders building really cool CPG brands. So, Sophia Cheng, she is the founder and CEO of Oddball. Sophia, I'm so happy you're here today.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. To dive right in, I would love to hear about your background and then how you became a CPG founder and created Oddball.
Absolutely. So a little bit about my background. I grew up in Singapore and Hong Kong, so I didn't grow up here. Well, now I'm actually a first-gen immigrant. I immigrated myself here.
Very
Uh,
cool.
I actually, so I came here for college and I started my career in management consulting. Did that for about 2 years and then left and went to a hedge fund called Bridgewater Associates. So it's the biggest hedge fund in the world. I was doing private investments there, really interesting times. And then I left partially because I was doing a 4-hour commute every single day between New York and Westport, Connecticut. And
Wow.
so decided I can't do that anymore because I was spending like 20 hours on a bus every single week. And opportunistically, my old boss in consulting became the global head of strategy and transformation at Estee Lauder companies. So he hired me back as a strategy director. And that's how I got into CPG, to be honest. So that's quickly about my background.
Cool. So when was that time frame that you then went to Estee Lauder?
I think it was from 19 to 20,
Oh,
2009.
okay. Very cool. So then what was it like? What were you doing professionally before or during now starting Oddball?
So my most recent position was at Estee Lauder. So I was a
Oh,
strategy
okay.
at Estee Lauder. I was part of CEO's strategic initiatives team. So anything that was a high priority strategy, we would have to implement it as well. And it was a very interesting role, and I learned a lot. And yeah, I started doing Oddball honestly on a side while I was doing Estee Lauder. And I was doing that for about a year until like I just really couldn't do it anymore and just decided to make the jump. And here we are. So it's been 2 years since I've been doing Oddball full time.
That's what I was going to ask you next. So 2 years ago, that was what, 2022, still in that transformational time with COVID and the pandemic. And I think so many, not I think, I know so many founders who've just been on this podcast have launched within that time frame because they were like, you know what, I'm going to do what I really love to do. I'm going to leave this 9 to 5, even though it's a really great job, to follow my passion and start a brand. So what made you want to go all in and leave your position there?
Think that's a really good question. I think it's very scary, right? Like it's a very
Right.
scary. No matter if you come from a corporate world, I do think that no matter who you are, where you're at and all that, like it still feels like jumping off a cliff no matter how like prepared you try to be, right? And so I think for me it was honestly a snowball effect, right? Like I started this because it was something that I wanted in my diet that was missing, truthfully, right? Like I didn't plan on being a travel jealous saleswoman, right? Which is what I am now. So it really kind of grew on its own and it got to a point where like a lot of major retailers were interested. And so when I got to that point, I realized like this is not something that I could do like half-assed, right? Like I cannot just be doing this on a side. It needed to be full and it needed my full intention. And I think at a certain point, like as an entrepreneur, you do need to make that leap. And um, for me, that was when I realized the major retailers were interested and there was like enough, data for me to understand like there's a demand for this product and I wasn't just like making it up as a hobby, right?
Right. So it was still scary making that leap, but then you did have some data and insight of like, okay, this could take off if I put my all into it. And it sounds like that data and insight helped you feel like, okay, I can make this leap.
Yeah, so like when I was at Estee Lauder, I spent about a year just literally being a travel jealous saleswoman, right? I was carrying this huge cooler and going from, pop-up to farmers market to event, like, and just going wherever I can. And these were like bench samples that were made from the kitchen, right? And we were selling them because I wanted to see It's a very rare moment, right? Like, because even if you're in retailers, you don't get the same kind of data or like, qualitative data, right? Of being there and watching who is resonating with your product, like why they're
Right.
resonating, like, what were the messages or what about the product that needs to be improved? What were the aspects that like people were drawn to? So, and we were selling out at all these pop-ups and the events and farmers market, etc. And so for me, that was like enough of an indication, right? But I think for different people, it's different.
Absolutely. So for someone who's listening and isn't quite sure what Oddball is, how do you describe your product? Because it's really innovative and unique. Can you walk us through some of those differentiators?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in a nutshell, people would refer to it as a better for you Jello because it's the easiest way to refer to it, right? Um, but I can't call it a Jello. Jello's a brand, right? Not a category. So I call it jiggly fruit snack, to be honest. But in a nutshell, I would say, the most basic form, it's think of it as an intersection of three things, right? Like it's got the texture and the nostalgia of a Jello, but it's got the ingredient simplicity of a fruit cup, right? If you're remembering the Dole fruit cups growing up.
Yes.
But it's got, the eating occasion of like a fruit snack, right? Like a fruit gummy. And so to me, it really is that intersection of those three things. But I always say, like, and ironically, I just called it a better for you Jello because everyone does. That's actually not what I want to be, right? Like I always say, oddball at its core is what I believe what Jello should have been from the beginning, right? Because
Mm,
like you don't really need the red dye 40, you don't really need the high fructose corn syrup, you don't really need, all of those ingredients that you just simply like isn't great for you. And so we're made out of like real fruit. We're made out of no gelatin, right? We use agar, not because I was trying to replace gelatin. I don't think gelatin is bad, but simply because that is not what we grew up using in Asia as a gelling agent, right? We don't use any added sugars, no fancy designer chemicals or no fancy designer sweeteners, no
right.
preservatives. It simply is a very simple, understandable product that you can trust.
I love that. And as someone who is I'm not totally plant-based, but I eat primarily plant-based. When I was full on, I was always looking at gelatin and I didn't consume it, but now I'm a bit more flexible. But I love that your product is using something different too, which I'm so excited. I have a package waiting for me of your product that I've been eyeing on social. So I'm really, really excited to try it now after I wanted to talk to you first and then experience it. So when you were starting to put yourself out there and put the product out there and started doing those initial pop-ups, what was your strategy around that? Maybe where you were popping up or who you wanted to get in front of, maybe who you thought were going to be your first early adapters. I would love to hear your thought process there.
Yeah, I think, in the early days, right? Like for me, like as a person, like I'm very strategy focused, right? Because that's my
That's
bread
your
and butter,
background, right?
my background. And so, the first, like the two things that really mattered to me was, well, three things, right? Like one is like what is the problem, like the problem that this product is solving for, right? And then that led to, the product strategy, which was to me the second most important thing. And then the third thing is the brand strategy, right? And
Right.
so maybe I was over engineering, but like that's just, how I operate, right? And so the brand strategy very early on, like I knew that was not my bread and butter, right? And someone could do it better than me. And so I met someone, her name is Kim, and she's been with me since, day one. And back then she was at Vice, and then she went to our place. Now she's at TikTok, and she's always been with me freelancing. But she
Very
put together a
cool.
brand strategy. And that is the only thing that we have never deviated away from, right? And we did it very scrappily, right? Like I paid her like very little money, honestly, and bless Kim. And very early on, right? Like we had identified two groups of people as our primary consumer, like as a first thesis, right? I don't know, it might change. The first being what we call the self-aware snackers, right? I think you understand what that is. And then
Mhm.
the other one being the conscious cool moms, right? And so that has always been the two targets that we've been going after, and we never deviated from that.
I love that verbiage too. I love that. So when you first were doing your pop-ups and wanting to get that initial feedback, where were you going to connect with those 2 different, consumers?
Yeah, so it honestly happened all by accident, right? Like, for the longest time, I was just dilly-dallying in my kitchen, right? Like just this was just kind of a hobby, right, during COVID, and I wasn't sure where this was going, right? I thought at best that maybe we'll go into some bodegas first, etc. But luckily, Female Quotient was putting together this event, right, which is a female founder showcase at the Super Bowl. And so that was the first time people has ever tried our product.
Oh my gosh, what a
I know,
way to kick things off.
I know, it was absolutely insane, right? But I was like, there's no way I can miss this opportunity, right? But before that, it was just all concepts, right? The brand was a concept, the product was a concept. And so within that week, like I was like, no, like we're gonna get something out there, no matter what form it is, no matter whether it makes it or not. And then we got there. It was Taste of the NFL Super Bowl, which happens, every year before the Super Bowl. And yeah, that was, I have this football, which is like one of my proudest things that I own. And by the way, I don't watch football, but that football was like the first like 30 people that's ever tried football and tried Oddball, right? And they were all ex-NFL athletes, current NFL athletes, etc. And that's when I knew I had something, right? Because even my target consumers, and these are all hardcore athletes, I would consider, right?
Right.
They were coming back for like more and more, right? Like there's some people who were eating like 6 in a row, right? Like there were people who were grabbing other people to come try. And I had never seen people try this product. And so that was when I was like, okay, I knew I had something there. And then from then on, like, I don't know what it was, but I honestly think it might be us getting on Andrea Snack Shot's radar.
Mm-hmm.
And the invites just kept rolling in, right? Like the Brooklyn Museum reached out for, they do like this pop-up. It was an incredible pop-up, every single Sunday outside the Brooklyn Museum. And so
Right.
then I started there. And then from there on, like other events started reaching out, other pop-ups started reaching out. And so, you know what it is? Like, I don't think I was super strategic or super intentional about it, but I listened to where people wanted us.
Yes. Yes. And so what was the name of the organization that you did the tasting with at the football game?
It was Female Quotient.
Female Quotient?
Female Quotient.
Quotient. Very cool. I'm going to look them up. That sounds amazing.
Yeah,
And
no, they're great. Like they're big, and I want to give them like a shout out too, right? Because that's
right.
it.
What a great origin story. I mean, that is so iconic to launch that way. So that was what year? Was that last year or the year prior?
That was 2000. That was 2 years ago, I think.
Okay. So where is the company now? I believe that you said you're in the manufacturing office.
Yeah.
So walk us through like what is the state of the state now of Oddball?
So we're still pre-launch. We've been pre-launch for a really long time, right? I mean, honestly, like I don't really know what the definition of a launch really means. But I think, at a certain point, like as an entrepreneur in food, again, this is me, right? There's many ways to cut the cake or whatever that saying is you kind of decide whether you want to go slow or you want to go fast, right? Because it's actually very hard to survive in the middle path. And for me, recognizing the category that I'm in, recognizing the type of person I am, the personality that I have, what type of product this is, I decided that like I wanted to run a company that is going to scale fast, right? But able to scale fast, you need to have the right setup. You need to have the right product. You need to have the right innovation. You need to have the right team, right? And so I decided last year, it was last summer when, oh, this is another thing, right? Like I was entering a lot of pitch competitions. And so the first pitch competition, and sorry, I'm deviating a little bit, but
no,
the first pitch competition I did was Fairway ShopRite. And we were top 5, right? Like we didn't win the grand final prize, but they still wanted us in. And that was when I was like, okay, I know that we have enough interest to scale.
Right.
Right. So they were big enough for us to know, for me to recognize that like I can go with a faster path. And so that was the moment when I decided, okay, like my product needs to be buttoned up. It needs to be commercially scalable. We need a proper co-man. I need a proper team, and we need to be scaling at launch. And so that's where we're at now, right? And it's taking us some time, but who knows if I'm doing this right or not. I hope I am, but that's the path that I had decided for us, right? And so right now, I'm at my co-man's facility. We're scaling up, right? Like we're figuring out all the kinks because again, like it's such a unique product in the US, right? That like every single step of the way is a new invention, right? So like every step of the way in manufacturing is a new invention. So every piece, little piece, right? Like for such a fickle product, it's so difficult to figure out. So that's one piece, right? We're figuring that out. And then the other piece is building a team around me, right? So I know I have incredible executives who have come on board, right? And I'm very fortunate to have them. Rochelle, who's our head of sales, comes from, I don't know, like maybe 2 decades of experience in like selling CPG products, and Liz, who has like so
Incredible.
much experience in scaling operations for food companies from 0 to like 100, right? And we're looking to launch probably in the next few weeks, slowly, right? Like in terms of first the e-tailers with our launch partners, Fresh Direct and Imperfect Foods, right? They come first, and our own D2C. So that'll be 2024. And then 2025, we're going to launch nationwide with a national retailer, which I'm not going to say right now. But again,
Okay, keep us updated though.
yeah,
I'll
I
share it
absolutely will.
after.
But yeah, like I think, that's where we're at, is we're preparing for scale.
So that is an interesting way of describing it. You know that you want to scale relatively fast and you know that you have these opportunities. So it sounded like the buildup took a little bit more time. I mean, 2 years is still relatively quick if you think about it, but I understand in CPG world it like could feel like a million years, but it sounds like you're building a really solid foundation so that when you get those orders, you know that you could deliver and keep scaling.
Exactly. I think the foundation part for CPG is the boring part, right?
Yes,
It's the right softwares. It's getting, it's having your finances in order, right? It's making sure that you have like you're very tight with your cash flows and stuff like that. It's all the boring stuff like that people don't want to be involved with, right? But
right,
need that to be able to scale, because CPG, the margins are too thin for you not to do that, right?
right.
So, that's the path that you choose, but you can also choose the other path, right? Of going slower.
Right. Is there anything that you've learned thus far in the last 2 years that you would share with a founder who's maybe just on that cusp of figuring out what is the product they wanna launch with, and maybe they're working at that corporate job and they're ready to be like, "I think I'm ready to make the jump," or they're in the really early days of getting their product out, say, at a pop-up. Any advice there?
I think, and this is something that, I've observed personally, right? And again, this is due to my background of coming from strategy and essentially my entire career, right? Is I think a lot of founders don't ask themselves, especially in CPG, right? Because CPG can come off as so sexy,
Right,
right? I think people don't ask themselves, what problem is this brand solving for?
right,
And that's how we end up with so much crap out there, right? Not
right,
crap in a literal sense of like bad things, but like just like so many stuff, right? That really is just not solving for any need or any problems or anything that needs solving for. So it then eventually begs the question of, why does this exist?
right, and really drilling that down.
Mhm.
For you, what is the answer that you share to that question for Oddball?
So what Oddball has always been about is, we didn't start off as me wanting to start a Jello company, right? Like it started off because me, as someone who who lives in New York, and one of the most convenient places ever, and someone who just loves junk food. Like, I love junk food. I love chips. I love gummies. I love chocolate. And realizing at a certain point in my life, right, when I was like, I don't know, like 25, my metabolism was slowing. I can't eat like this for the rest of my life.
Right,
So when I really started looking for an alternative, right, and I was going to the Whole Foods and all these specialty grocers, I realized that I was flooded with what I consider as catfish food, right? Food pretending to be another food, right? I'm talking about, a protein cookie that's
oh, I get what you're
no,
ha
like,
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
making this term up, by the way.
That's good. I like that, okay.
Yeah, so like it's what I consider as like, oh my God, I'm getting catfish by my food, right? It's like I don't know,
Right,
a cauliflower pizza, or like a protein shake that's pretending to be a milkshake. Whereas for me, I'm not just looking to get my macros, right? I'm looking to enjoy my food and truly just be a bit healthier, right? And so for me, there was that gap that it was totally missing in my life, right? And I think a lot of people are also looking for that, where they need something that's easy enough for them to really just make that change, and taste is still first, right? And enjoyment and eating and all of that. And when I started thinking of how I grew up eating in Asia, right? It's this concept of you're always eating real food, right? When
Right.
it comes to snacks, it's I call again, I'm making them a term, fresh snacking, right? Or real snacking, where it's based on a real food, right? It's seaweed or beans or fruit or dried
Right.
seafood, and it's minimally processed. Whereas here, we've gotten so used to chemicals and ultra processed. So
Right.
that was the problem that I saw. Was Oddball was always about bringing the next iteration of snacking, which to me is real snacking or fresh snacking or whatever you want to call it, right? Real food that is minimally processed as snacks.
So cool. I'm so excited now. I purposely, like I said, wanted to talk to you and then to have the whole experience of the product. Congratulations, because it's not an easy task. And it sounds like you are really preparing yourself well for an incredible launch and to be able to scale with major retailers in the year ahead. And just congratulations. It's a lot of hard work. And like you said, a lot of boring stuff to get the foundation on really steady ground. And it sounds like you've just really had your head down figuring it out. And I can't wait to see where it all goes.
Thank you so much. And seriously, thank you for your time. Like, I think your podcast is amazing, and I would love to hear your feedback. Hopefully you enjoy them.
Yes, absolutely. I honestly, I just got it yesterday and I wanted to take a, because I'm going to make a reel and all that good stuff because I love Jello products. I lived in Asia during college and I loved all the Jellos that I was exposed to there. And I really haven't found many products like that, even living in New York City. And so your product really has been on my radar. So thank you for creating something really cool and innovative. Um, before I let you go, where can people shop the pre-sale or go on the wait list or know where you're going to be launching and when you launch?
Absolutely. So that's my favorite question. Waitlist, obviously, is oddball.world, our website. We'll be soon at pop-up grocer. So if anyone wants to pick up there first, I'll probably be first.
Yes.
And then very soon, shortly, it'll be Fresh Direct and Imperfect Foods. So yeah, and then our own D2C.
Amazing. I'll put that all in the show notes. Keep me updated also. I'll be happy to share all the updates of Oddball and everything that's happening. Congratulations. Thank you again for sharing. And thank you everyone for listening. Go check out Oddball.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.